What if the family that you worked for decades turned on you in a courtroom? What if the people that you swore to take care of stood up in court and disclosed the secrets that you never wanted the world to know? That is precisely what went down with Kody Brown, the father who once flaunted he had the perfect plural marriage. It was a day that would go down in Sister Wives history as the most dramatic ever. Robyn and Janelle, two of his own wives, finally spoke out in a way nobody expected. Their words did not only rattle Kody, they shattered the Brown family persona forever. Reporters and cameras surrounded the courthouse steps, flashing like 4th of July fireworks. Family members waited outside, holding up signs, some of which read Team Janelle in large letters, others still bearing Kody's name. The atmosphere inside was tense enough to be sliced with a knife. Kody entered, flashing his trademark confident smile, but everyone who knew him could see the fissures. His eyes bounced around the room as if searching for an exit. Robyn and Janelle occupied opposite sides of the bench, their attitude yelling that they weren't there as solid wives. They were here as witnesses with a purpose. And when the judge asked the court to come to order, the first punch hit hard. Robyn, who had been depicted as Kody's favorite and most faithful wife, was the last fan wanted to see turn the tables. But as she testified on the stand, her voice shook, not with fear but with years of suppression. She testified about the pressure to consistently justify Kody's choices, even if she didn't think they were right. "I was advised that honesty couldn't be more than loyalty," she confessed, her eyes shining. Her words created a portrait of a man who insisted that you trust him, but did not always extend it in return. The courtroom moved. You could sense it. Even Kody, who had been sitting back smugly, sat up in his chair. This was not the Robyn he believed he knew. If Robyn's testimony rocked the courtroom, Janelle's almost blew the roof off. She didn't just discuss emotional neglect. She referenced financial betrayal. "Family money," she explained, "was transferred against our will. It was given to projects which benefited only one segment of the family." Robyn sighed, gasps circled the room. And just as everyone thought Robyn would immediately deny it, she quietly confessed that some of it was true. She explained that Kody had assured her it was temporary, but temporary had become years. This wasn't about cash. This was about trust. And Janelle's voice commanded the authority of a woman who had been quietly tallying up each blow for more than a decade. As if things weren't dramatic enough, Christine Brown, the wife who had already split with Kody, arrived in the courtroom as a witness. She didn't pull any punches. When one wife gets priority, she insisted, the others become disposable. Her remark wasn't an insult. It was a reflection, making Kody confront the trend he'd been in denial about for years. Kody's jaw hardened, his fists curled, but he remained quiet. The longer the testimonies continued, the thicker the air grew. Janelle's voice broke when she talked about feeling invisible in her own marriage. Robyn said she felt trapped, caught between defending her husband and cohabiting with decisions she didn't support. This was not just a basic family feud anymore. This was the downfall of a decades-long marriage, right before strangers, cameras, and the rest of the world. When finally Kody had his say, he did what he's always done. He lashed back. He claimed all his decisions were made to protect the family, and that sometimes it was necessary to be a leader and make unpopular decisions. But this time, the room did not believe it. The stunned silence that followed his words was not a silence of concord. It was the kind heavy with distrust, when everybody knows the tale told ain't the truth. By the time court recessed, the official ruling hadn't yet been made, but in the public opinion court, the harm was already done. Social media erupted with hashtags, #TeamJanelle, #Justice, for Christine, #Robyn. Speaks Out fans who had stood up for Kody all these years admitted they were stunned. Others said they knew it all along. Outside the courtroom, the Browns shunned each other. Robyn rushed off in her car. Janelle was mobbed by reporters, and Kody walked with his head down, accompanied by his attorney. Christine hugged Janelle and left. A wordless display of support. The legal fight isn't finished. The judge also has to rule on the money issues and other things unresolved. But this is sure, that Brown family we knew on TV is gone for good. For years they peddled the fantasy of unshakable plural marriage. Today that fantasy is in tatters on the courthouse floor. Will this be the last chapter in Kody Brown's saga, or the start of a new, even wilder one? If there's one thing fans have learned, it's that when it comes to the Browns, the drama doesn't end when the cameras stop rolling. And after what just happened in court, the world will be watching their every move. It began as any other frigid winter morning in Flagstaff, Arizona. Except this was not going to be an ordinary day for anyone bearing the Brown name. The sky was gray, heavy clouds extending along the horizon, like a solid wall of gray. The air nipped at the skin, stinging as if the very atmosphere had joined forces to meet the seriousness of what was about to occur. The moment the doors of the courthouse opened, the atmosphere outside was charged. Double-parked news trucks already occupied the curb, their satellite dishes aimed toward the sky, prepared to transmit every dramatic second into living rooms nationwide. Photographers stood in tight little groups, fine-tuning lenses, checking light settings, and swapping bits of urgently whispered rumor they had heard from sources close to the family. This was no ordinary trial. For more than a decade, millions of people had seen the Browns on Sister Wives, a family that sermonized about unity, strength, and the idea that love could be doubled without being halved. But those cameras, as shiny as they were, could never completely show the truth brewing below the surface. And now, all of the fractures the public had speculated about were going to be revealed under oath. By 8 a.m., there was a crowd of fans, a combination of curious locals and die-hard Sister Wives faithful. Others carried homemade signs. Team Janelle in sparkly pink letters, Justice for Christine in big black letters, and even some We Love You Kody signs clutched by the loyal minority still rallying behind the patriarch. A guy wearing a thick parka was broadcasting to thousands of viewers on TikTok, calling out the arrivals as though he were calling an athletic contest. A woman standing by the steps grasped a coffee in one hand and a tabloid in the other, flipping pages featuring side-by-side images of the Browns, then and now. The rumors began when a black sports utility vehicle drew up alongside the curb. Its darkly tinted windows mirrored the overcast sky as if hiding its occupant from the turmoil on the outside. As the door swung open, Kody Brown emerged. Kody's arrival. He was dressed in a stylish navy coat over a sharply laundered white shirt. His golden curls, the same ones that had been both revered and ridiculed on social media for years, now just lightly disheveled by the wind. His walk was purposeful. His chin held high, but there was something in his eyes. It wasn't fear, per se. Kody Brown is never a man who wears fear openly. But there was a glimmer of something else. Caution maybe. His eyes scanned the throng, paused for a heartbeat on a reporter yelling questions, before shifting sharply toward the courthouse steps. The snapping of cameras was incessant. Every flash made him stop in his tracks, suspended in the tension in his jaw, the clutch of his hand on his briefcase just a little too hard. Robyn's entrance. 5 minutes later, a second car arrived. This one? A deep maroon sedan. Robyn Brown emerged. Her dark hair pulled under a camel-hued coat, oversized sunglasses covered her eyes, but not the tight line of her mouth. A thick folder, its edges worn from too many times it had been opened and closed, was held tightly in one hand. She didn't glance at the onlookers. She hardly even slowed her stride. She clicked her heels against the sidewalk, a tense, almost defiant beat as she walked towards the door. A fan shouted out, "We love you, Robyn," but she didn't react. Her attention was icy cold, her pace rapid, as if she understood that the longer she stayed public eye, the greater chance there was for gossip. Janelle's arrival. The rumblings intensified when a third car arrived. A silver SUV. Janelle Brown stepped out, dressed in a charcoal coat over a plain teal blouse, her blonde ponytail pulled back in a no-nonsense style. Unlike Kody and Robyn, Janelle didn't hurry. She walked at a steady pace, her eyes surveying the gathering as if gauging every response. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She simply walked, shoulders squared, the epitome of calm, but her fists, clenched into hard little knots, spoke otherwise. Court staff inside sensed the tension at once. The three of them, Kody, Robyn, and Janelle, did not greet one another. No nods, no eye contact. If anything, they went about their orbits like planets in the same orbit but deliberately not going to collide. Inside the courtroom itself was a daunting room, soaring ceilings, tall windows admitting slivers of pale winter sunlight, and banked ranks of polished wood benches, crowded with both the public and media. The aroma of coffee blended with the slight sheen of floor polish. All the seats were occupied. Others who couldn't find a seat pushed their faces up against the glass of the hallway doors, hoping to catch a view. Court officers waited at the sides of the walls, eyes scanning for any sign of disturbance. The judge, a tall man with steel-gray hair, walked in with the quiet dignity of one who knew the seriousness of the day's proceedings. Chatter ceased at once. The gavel came down on the sound block once. A sharp, ringing crack that seemed to mark the start of something unchangeable. The moment it began, for the first few minutes, things were business as usual. Case numbers were read, procedural issues dealt with. But everybody's eyes in the room were on who would testify first. As the judge called the first witness to the stand, Robyn rose. It was unexpected. Many had assumed Janelle would lead the charge, given her history of openly questioning Kody in recent seasons. But here was Robyn, the woman often seen as Kody's closest ally, rising from her seat. She adjusted the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. Her first words were barely above a whisper. "I've been told for years that loyalty is more important than honesty." The room changed. You sensed it, a small, barely discernible shift in the atmosphere. A pre-thunderclap moment. She continued, her words growing stronger with every sentence. She talked of the guilt of defending choices that she didn't think were right, of the sleepless nights spent telling herself it was better to just go along rather than to object. She did not make direct accusations yet, but it was clear what was implied. This was going to be different Robyn Brown than people had expected to meet. Across the aisle, Kody's body hardened, his jaw ground as if pushing words back that he was not ready to let go. The silent covenant as Robyn spoke. Janelle sat, absolutely motionless. Her eyes forward. She did not nod, but there was something to her that indicated she was taking it all in, storing it away. It was then that several in the room came to understand. This wasn't going to be a collective front against external criticism. This was going to be a civil war. And the first cannon had just been let loose. Not by Janelle, but by Robyn herself. The burden of the revelation spread across the benches. Pen to paper, reporters scribbled wildly on notepads. Somewhere in the rear section, a looker gasped audibly. The judge leaned forward, his eyes squinting slightly, as if coming to understand that today's testimony could go a lot further than had been anticipated. Kody looked once at Robyn, then at Janelle, and for an instant the mask was dropped. His face wasn't one of command or assertion. It was one of a man who knew, possibly for the first time, that the tale was no longer his to tell. The first testimony of Robyn still lingered in the air like smoke after a shot. The courtroom, once replete with anxious fidgeting, now stood stiff in a cold, almost worshipful silence. You could sense it, that instant awareness of everyone in the room that this was not going to be the tidy packaged family battle they'd anticipated. As Robyn left the witness stand, she never looked at Kody. She didn't look in Janelle's direction either. She just kept her eyes on the horizon, walking towards her chair as if she carried a burden that no one else had seen. And amidst the silence, something changed, not only in the courtroom, but in how the Browns' narrative would be recalled. The Browns had been the star family of polygamy in mainstream media for years. Sister wives didn't merely reveal their ordinary day-to-day life. It sold a dream. They were packaged as a close-knit family, brought together not by traditional rules of marriage, but by a collective hope that love could be extended across several households without breaking. There were the dinner parties at home, where everyone laughed in big kitchens. There were the family outings when the children played together like one huge sibling family. There were the Christmas episodes, the coordinating outfits, the gifts carefully wrapped in festive paper, the hugs that were posed but felt rehearsed. On the surface, it was believable. But anyone who's ever lived in a family, any family at all, knows that smiles can cover 1,000 cracks. And for the Browns, those cracks were years old. If Robyn's testimony was the surprise opening act, Janelle's eye was the smoldering ember that had been patiently waiting for its cue. Before the cameras ever rolled up to the courthouse, Janelle had been maintaining what she often half-joked she kept: her mental ledger. It wasn't a literal notebook, although at times she'd been tempted to begin one, but a deliberate, subdued tally of every slight, every broken vow, every instance that she sensed Kody's priorities tipping toward Robyn's line of the family. There was the occasion when Kody had vowed equal investments in all of the wives' homes, only for the money to somehow be spent on remodels for Robyn's home. There were the dozens of nights he spent alone at Robyn's residence, skipping events at Janelle's without even a phone call. There were the business moves wherein he said he was doing for the family but never checked with the others. The show had teased these tensions, the clipped words, the passive-aggressive smile, but reality TV smoothed over the nastiest rough edges. The courtroom did not. Robyn's claim that she'd been pressured to stand up for Kody even when she didn't agree was more than a grievance. It was proof of something the other wives had long wondered about, that she knew about the favoritism, even if she'd never really spoken about it aloud. For Janelle, hearing those words was a strange combination of confirmation and skepticism. It was proof that she hadn't been delusional. It was, on the other hand, a discomfiting question. If Robyn had always known, then why hadn't she spoken out until now? The solution, perhaps, was in the nuance of their agreement. In a plural marriage, particularly one as public, loyalty wasn't merely promoted, it was mandatory. To transgress that code was to be at risk of being the one who brought the family down. And for years Robyn had carried that weight in silence, justifying choices she didn't support because she was afraid of the alternative. Viewers didn't see, over the course of the show, what off-camera negotiations took place. The Browns weren't a family, they were a brand. Every argument had to be balanced with how it would appear the following season. If there was conflict, it could be spun as a lively debate. If there was hurt, it could be massaged with a family gathering montage. But the reality was not so simple. Janelle complained the issues she raised were recorded but not implemented, that her function was to bring up problems so Kody could appear to hear their complaints without any real intent to do anything about them. Robyn, meanwhile, stood as the newest and most demonstratively affectionate wife, a shield and a lightning rod. Kody relied on her as a partner, but also employed her presence to deflect negative criticisms. When other wives griped, he could always point to Robyn as someone who gets him. For years the cracks were not visible to the public. The Browns' polished image was robust enough to withstand small-town gossip. And then came the pandemic years. Years that ripped away the thin veneer over the family's inner workings. Kody's rigid rules, which he insisted were all about keeping everyone healthy, actually served to cut the wives off from one another and deepen cracks that already existed. Janelle, who prized individuality, resented the restrictions. Christine finally had an emotional breakdown and got out. And meanwhile, Robyn appeared to have more freedom with Kody than any of the other wives, something that didn't escape notice. By the time they arrived at the courthouse, public opinion had already changed. The forever family was now a cautionary tale of favoritism and control. During the days leading up to the trial, Janelle had appeared calm on the surface. She gave no interviews, made no public comments. But in secret she was gearing up, not with lawyers schooling her in what to say, but with an inner commitment to simply lay it all out. For Janelle, this was not about revenge. It was about truth. She had spent too long biting her tongue, attempting to keep the peace in a system that did not reward her with much peace. And now, with the courtroom as her platform and the country watching, she meant to ensure that her voice was heard. As the judge indicated that it was time for the next round of testimony, there was a subtle, almost indefinable energy change. The drama between Kody and Janelle wasn't showy. It was real, complicated with years of context that could not be distilled into neat sound bites. Kody sat stiffly, his fingers drumming briefly against the table before remaining stationary. Janelle's face didn't change, but her gaze held him with a steady intensity that made even some observers look away. This was not so much about right or wrong in one particular fight. This was about decades of feeling invisible, undervalued, and now, at last, unfettered. As the Fishers and the Brown family became apparent in court, something else was unfolding in the public psyche. Fans who had originally watched for entertainment now saw as the curtain came down on a long-lived fiction. The case was not merely about money disputes or romance drama. It was about trust, transparency, and the subtle ways resentment can accumulate in any family when some voices are heard above others. The courtroom was heavy with tension, so much so that even the rustling of someone shifting in their seat sounded deafening. The gavel of the judge had hardly hit the desk when Janelle was back on the stand. But this time her attitude was different. Her previous measured tone had given way to something more pointed, stoked by years of suppressed anger and a fierce determination to finally have her voice heard. The crowd, full of journalists, sister wives, drama enthusiasts, and inquisitive locals, leaned in. Everyone could sense it. Something huge was about to fall. Kody sat rigidly at the defense table, arms folded, eyes squinting at Janelle like a man bracing for impact. Robyn sat next to him, but not holding hands, as she had before. Her eyes nervously flitted between Janelle and the judge instead, as if she knew that what was about to be spoken could carry repercussions for her, too. Janelle began slowly, as if feeling her way through. "Your Honor," she started, her tone firm but with an edge. "For years I kept my head down. I didn't want to be the one to reveal our family's internal struggles, but keeping those secrets only covered the wrong people, and I'm done covering for them." There was a stir in the gallery, low murmurs among the spectators. This isn't about divorce documents or custody arrangements. This is about financial manipulation, emotional isolation, and a history of betrayal that's been swept under the rug for far too long. Kody's lawyer jumped in, shouting that it was irrelevant and purely emotional testimony, but the judge held up a hand for silence. "Let her speak," the judge instructed strongly. Then Janelle pulled out of a manila folder she had brought to the witness stand what looked like photocopies of handwritten bank statements and notes. The bailiff gave them to the judge and opposing counsel. "These," Janelle continued, "are receipts of funds that were intended to go towards constructing houses for all 4 wives equally. But if you closely look," she gestured to a section highlighted by her lawyer, "you'll notice the withdrawals were taken straight into an account that only Kody and Robyn had access to." Gasps filled the courtroom. Even the court reporter's eyes widened for a brief moment before she resumed typing on her keys. Robyn clearly winced, her eyes cast at the floor. Kody, however, sat up straight in his chair, jaw clenched. "That's not the whole story," he growled sotto voce, but loudly enough for several to overhear. The bombshell. The bombshell landed like a tidal wave. The Sister Wives fans had long speculated about favoritism and financial issues, but never before had it been exposed under oath. Janelle's voice trembled, not with weakness, but with sheer emotional gravity. Meanwhile, the rest of us were stretching every last dollar to the breaking point. While our children were sleeping in one room and going without, Kody and Robyn were living in a brand new home, furnished, and we were told, "Just wait, your turn will come." And it never did. One journalist in the press gallery scribbled away busily in a notebook, while another was chatting into their phone, obviously providing live updates to a news organization. So far, Robyn had said nothing, taking the sting. But then she rose, not able to keep it in. "That's not fair, Janelle," she exploded, her voice shaking. "You know why events unfolded as they did. You understand the pressure we were under. You're distorting the truth." The judge slammed the gavel on the bench. "Mrs. Brown, you'll have your say. Sit down." Robyn hesitated to sit, but it was too late. Her tantrum had only served to raise more questions in the room. Guilt, panic, real frustration at being cast as a villain. Janelle wasn't done. She drew a breath and laid out the killer blow that left the courtroom stunned in shock. Whilst Kody was instructing the guests of us to buckle down, he was making furtive property deals, ones to which Robyn was being added, but the rest of us were not. And I only knew because one of the children happened to spot the forms on the kitchen counter and brought them to me. Kody pounded his hand on the table at that. "That's enough," he growled, his voice thundering through the room. The judge quickly jumped in to warn him to calm himself down. As his turn to reply came, Kody leaned forward, his voice cold but calculated. "Janelle, you're leaving out the section where you wouldn't be a team player. You've been undermining me for years. making unilateral decisions, alienating the kids from me. You want to discuss betrayal? Let's discuss you stealing money out of the family fund to assist your sons in purchasing a home without informing us. Janelle didn't bat an eyelash. I did that because they were being left out, just like I was. The drama was excruciating. Even the judge appeared to acknowledge that what was happening was something greater than a court battle. It was the public breaking down of a family. Social media postings were erupting by this point. Trends included #Brown family trial, #sister wives truth, and #Team Janelle in just minutes. Outside the courthouse, fans were congregating with homemade placards, some for Janelle, others for Kody and Robyn. Inside, the jurors appeared as though they were witnessing a high-drama melodrama unfold before their eyes. One juror confessed that she could sense her pulse pounding throughout the testimony. Just as the judge was about to recess for the afternoon, Janelle presented one final piece of testimony. Your Honor, I remained in that family as long as I did, because I believed in the concept of unity, but only when everyone is truthful does unity function. And the truth is, Kody shattered that trust years ago. This trial is not the start of our family's breaking. It's the culmination of a lengthy, agonizing cover-up. The judge ordered a recess, but nobody stirred right away. The audience remained seated, a buzz in hushed tones. Kody and Robyn clung to their attorney, their white faces set in determination. Janelle emerged from the courtroom, with her head held high, accompanied by her children. Outside, the cameras waited, microphones pushed forward, journalists yelled questions, and the story was already gathering steam into something much greater than a custody or money battle. It had become a full-blown reckoning for the sister wives family. The air in the courtroom was thick, the sort of thick where each breath tasted like it carried weight. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsher shadows now, illuminating every twitch, every micro-expression, every clenching jaw. This was no longer a matter of law. This was the arena where decades of trust, secrecy and simmering resentments were about to be stripped bare. And the tension wasn't only between Kody and his wives anymore, it was spreading to everybody in that room. Robyn sat on the witness stand, her fingers interlaced so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had been preparing for this moment. Or at least she thought she was. In her head, she had planned out what she would say, how she would remain calm, how she would not let emotion catch up with her. But now, as Kody stood merely a few feet away, looking at her with that combination of shock and hurt pride, those carefully rehearsed lines felt like paper in a hurricane. "Mrs. Brown," said the attorney, leaning forward ever so slightly, "you've stated that there were certain financial transactions between you and Mr. Brown, about which you were not fully open. Would you tell the court what you meant by that?" The room leaned forward. The spectators, the reporters, even the bailiff seemed more attentive. Robyn took a deep breath, her voice trembling initially, then gaining voice. For years Kody claimed that all the wives trusted him to manage the finances, that he was doing it for the benefit of the family. But that wasn't always so. There were accounts we didn't know about, transactions that didn't add up to the income we thought we had. Kody's attorney jumped to her feet. "Objection, hearsay." The judge, a strict-looking woman with eyes capable of cutting through excuses, arched an eyebrow. "Overruled. Proceed, Mrs. Brown." Robyn shot Kody another look. His mouth was set into a thin line, and for a fleeting moment she could have sworn his foot tapped unsteadily beneath the table. That small motion said more than words. He was angry and perhaps a little afraid. She went on. "It wasn't about the money. It was about control. About making some wives reliant while others were rewarded. It bred resentment. And I think it was deliberate." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Janelle, perched just behind the witness stand, didn't even blink. If anything, she appeared as though someone had finally spoken out loud a secret she'd been bearing for years. Her hands, which were folded on her lap, curled into fists. When it was her turn to testify, she had no time for pleasantries. She talked in the bluntness that had always characterized her, the sort that could cut through politeness and go directly to the pain. Kody's polygamy was all about control, Janelle explained, eyes fixed on him. Not equality, not love. It was about him being the center point, controlling every choice, every relationship dynamic, every financial transaction. Kody shook his head slightly, grumbling something to his lawyer. But the judge's gaze remained on Janelle, motioning her to keep going. And when any of us criticized him, she added, her tone rising just a fraction, he spun it into betrayal. We couldn't disagree without being told we were splitting up the family. But the real truth is, the family was breaking long before any of us walked away. That declaration struck Kody like a punch. For years he had been projecting publicly that the wives were in error, that they had strayed from their religion or allegiance. Now those wives were ripping apart that narrative step by step before a crowd, and worse, before court documents that would last forever. The attorneys shot questions back and forth like arrows. Dates were cited, receipts were produced, text messages years old were read into the record. Some of the messages indicated fissures in the marriage years before the public had thought. Some were sparsely worded, transactional messages about money. Others were emotional, raw communications that illustrated a man juggling several emotional blazes but not managing to keep any of them from consuming the house. Then came the revelation that changed the vibe in the room completely. The lawyer pulled out a folder, pushed it onto the judge's bench, and then held up its contents in front of the court. It was a letter, handwritten, from Kody to Robyn, written only months before Christine had departed. In it, Kody spoke of cutting out distractions and concentrating on just one wife's household until loyalties were stabilized. It wasn't against the law, but it was incriminating. It was the sort of thing that didn't require a codified law to appear bad. It only required a jury of public opinion. Kody's face turned red. That was taken out of context, he said loudly, violating protocol. The judge's gavel came down once. Mr. Brown, you will be silent except upon direct address. But too late. Robyn's eyes sparkled, not with tears, but with the wistful relief of a person whose truth had finally been made plain. Janelle leaned back in her chair, appearing nearly vindicated. Outside the courtroom, the media storm was already brewing. Footage of Robyn's testimony and Janelle's incendiary remarks were filtering onto social media within minutes. Hashtags such as #BrownFamilyCourt and #KodyExposed started trending. People were taking sides, analyzing every glance, every hesitation, every edge of a smirk. Back in chambers, the tension was not merely emotional, it was strategic. Each word was a bullet. Each question was a chess move. The attorneys understood that they were playing not just for a legal victory, they were battling for the story that would be remembered for years to come by the public. By the time the judge ordered a recess, the room was charged with electricity, almost vibrating. The audience murmured to one another, replaying the most stunning scenes. Kody huddled in against his attorney, talking rapidly in a hushed tone. Robyn remained seated for a moment, catching her breath, as if standing would cause her legs to collapse. Janelle stood firmly, but at one point her eyes revealed the cost of reliving years of struggle. And yet, as they all emerged into the hallway, where cameras, microphones, and blinding flashes lay in wait, it was obvious this fight was by no means finished. Indeed, the most incendiary bombshells were yet to come, and the next hearing promised to transform the courtroom from a chamber of law into an all-out war zone of family history, broken promises, and the ultimate demolition of the Brown legend. When the judge's gavel finally came down, the resulting sound was like a gunshot ringing through the silent courtroom. Everyone knew, this was the end of an era. The Brown family, once united in a distinctive lifestyle and the notion of impenetrable togetherness, had gone beyond the point of return. Tears obscured faces, anger seethed in others. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. The verdict had been stern but just. Property settlements were agreed upon, debts were allocated, and hurts went on record, in cold black and white court transcripts. Kody remained immobile, his habitual self-assured stance slumped, his gaze blankly ahead. Robyn's hand lay lightly on his arm, but the touch was as much for herself as for him. On the other side of the aisle, Janelle sat with quiet strength, jaw clenched as though she was not going to let him see her crack. But even as the legal battle ended, the war of emotions was only just beginning. No victory parade awaited anyone when they left the courthouse. No one had really won the day. The family members in attendance were deafeningly silent, punctuated only by the clicking of photographers' cameras outside. Reporters shouted questions. Janelle, Do you regret marrying Kody? Robyn, did you hide financial records? Kody, are you still in contact with your other wives? None of them replied. Not that they didn't know, but because the responses would be pouring gasoline on a fire that had already burned too high. Entering her car was like entering another world for Janelle. She had struggled so fiercely for independence, and now she had it, albeit at a price she hadn't yet fully comprehended until now. The years of shared history, the inside jokes, the chaotic family dinners, even the small traditions, they were all gone. What remained was a fractured network of people who once called themselves family, now scattered like ashes in the wind. That night, Robyn cried for hours, not just because of the court's decision, but because the man she had married was now a shadow of himself. Kody's former passionate speeches regarding unity had been given way to grumbled words of betrayal, ingratitude, and lost loyalty. He paced the floor of their residence like a caged lion, going over scenes in his mind during the trial. She made me sound like a liar, he snarled, talking about Janelle's testimony. She manipulated everything. Robyn, attempting to soothe him, spoke gently. Kody, perhaps it is time to stop combating and heal. But recovery wasn't in Kody's vocabulary. At least, not yet. To himself, the others had decided to leave him behind, and he was left standing among the ruins. Janelle, on the other hand, made her first moves toward creating a life outside of Kody's grip. She sat down with a financial advisor, going over her newly acquired portion of assets. For the first time in years, she was in charge of making choices without Kody's say-so. She leased a small but lovely house, and with each box she opened she sensed fragments of herself restored. Still, the wounds ran deep. At times she would look at old family portraits, and experience the anguish over what was lost. Not the marriage itself, but the ideal she had once held to. She had wanted polygamy to build a larger, more loving family. Instead, it had generated factions, bitterness, and a battlefield that had now shifted from the living room to the courtroom. Among the drama, even though not physically attending each court hearing, Christine and Mary had been paying close attention. Christine, thriving in her new life, viewed the happenings as confirmation that she made the right choice in leaving earlier. "I saw it coming," she said to a friend over coffee. Kody's leadership style was always bound to blow up. Mary, however, had more conflicted feelings. She had been wounded deeply in the past by Kody, but watching the man she once loved look so defeated stirred something she did not expect: pity. Nevertheless, she knew better than to reach out. The hurt between them was too deep, and reconciliation would only pull her back into turmoil. The Brown family was not only experiencing personal agony, their soap opera was public domain. Social media went wild with theories, memes, and opinion. Hashtags #TeamJanelle and #Kody Exposed went viral for days. Fans analyzed each courtroom wardrobe choice, each expression, each mysterious Instagram post. Others supported Janelle, praising her for having the guts to speak up for herself. Others stood up for Kody, saying that he had been unjustly demonized. Robyn especially was a magnet for criticism, with people pointing her out as being the puppet master who controlled Kody's actions. Scanning through comments for the family was akin to opening up new wounds. Each post, each comment reminded them their own heartache was now a source of entertainment for millions. Weeks became months, and gradually the all-consuming emotion began to subside. The family members began living their individual lives more normally. Janelle resumed hiking, finding tranquility in the stillness of the mountains. Robyn concentrated on her kids, attempting to fashion a bubble of normalcy. Kody hung in the background mostly, making the occasional cryptic post on social media regarding loyalty and truth. But closure did not equal friendship. Not yet. They weren't calling one another to see how each was doing. They weren't having reunions planned. What they now had was space. And in a sense that was its own form of healing. After it appeared that the dust had finally settled, a rumor started spreading. One of the other wives was penning a tell-all memoir. No one verified it, but the threat hung over the family like a thunderhead. If this were true, it meant that each secret, each argument, each betrayal would soon be revealed for all the world to witness. It was the worst nightmare for Kody, the golden opportunity for the truth, her truth, to be spoken by Janelle. Another wound waiting to occur for Robyn.
The Brown family's court fight might be over, but their drama isn't finished yet. There remain unspoken words, unresolved resentments, and unanswered questions. Will they ever be at peace, or will the cracks continue to widen with time? One thing is sure, the family that once preached more than anything else was now a cautionary tale. They lived their lives under the spotlight, and ultimately the limelight exposed cracks that existed all along. Final narrator's hook for YouTube ending. And as the credits roll on this chapter of the Brown family's life, one can't help but ask, was this the end, or just a beginning? Because in the Browns' world, even ashes can be rekindled. So tune in, because this tale isn't over yet.